summer and, of course, fall. So we're worried about, I guess, just like overload of events and whether or not we should even, move forward with that. Talking about like perhaps going to like a virtual sort of event or ungala, but not really sure. And then, obviously beyond that, with our programs, just figuring out what is essential, what staff is essential, how do we still feed people and keep people safe, when we're supposed to be social distancing. So it's been an exciting time for us, as I'm sure for everyone.
One way to describe it, for sure. How many of you have events that you had to cancel?
Yes, we had to, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We did too.
Yeah.
Many.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine many of you are pretty dependent on that income from the events. It's not like a nice add-on. It's something that's central to your fundraising, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think for some of us, we're facing June 30 year end.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's not only the events, it's how do we
Earn a fiscal.
much income, whether it's earned income or contributed income coming in this time period. The financial markets certainly haven't helped.
Yeah.
And in York, we have Give Local York coming up on May 1st. And that looks like it might be an all digital event.
Mm-hmm.
But it's 5 weeks away and who knows where we'll be in 5 weeks. So there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. Let me address this event idea specifically before I get into the rest of things, because I'm sure that that's what a lot of you came to talk about, and it's sort of specific to and apart from some of the other tactics that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I think you have a couple different options. The virtual one is for sure an option. There are tools and resources now to do online auctions. With the beauty of the technology that we have today, you can mimic much of what you would have been doing in the room. So for example, if you were planning to show a video or have a presenter, you can do that online. And there are so I use Zoom. We're on Zoom today, and I have the Zoom Pro account, and that means you can have up to 100 people on a session at any given time. I chose to limit it to 30 because I've been working on Zoom for the past couple weeks now, and I found that everyone is now online, and so things get a little spotty and overloaded. So in theory, it says you can have 100, but I just chose to cap it at 30 to be safe. And then there's a level beyond that you can have up to 1,000 people and do like a webinar or conference environment. So there are technological mechanisms that you have available to you that you can take advantage of in that way. The other thing that you could do, so first of all, of people that have already made their sponsorship commitment, I would encourage you to call them and ask nicely if they can keep the sponsorship dollars that they contributed, and find other creative ways to showcase their support, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's an email to your entire constituency, different ways like that. But you can ask to keep that, and because sponsorships are there's an element where you're giving something in return, but it's still pretty much a donation. Chances are pretty good that people are going to let you hold on to the money that you've already collected. The third thing that you can do is go back, and this is where having a good database is really important. And it's a note to future self, if you don't already have this in place, that it can be really beneficial. But go back and look at previous year's attendance for the event, and then reach out to those guests and ask if they would make a contribution to the organization of the amount that they would have been purchasing tickets or making a donation to the auction or something like that, like they did in years past, in lieu of another event in the fall. And I'll talk about this in a little more about this in a moment, but we're in a time where we need to be really authentic and transparent. And I think it is okay for you to reach out and have conversations with your donors and say, hey, you know, we're really weighing this event. We had to postpone it. We were thinking about holding it in the fall, but so is everyone else. That's going to be an overload. And so we're working with our donors to see if there's a way that we can either create a pretty rewarding online experience for you, or if you would just be willing to make that contribution that you would have been giving at an event now. So I would think of those things, and you know your donor base better than I do, so you'll have a sense of what they'll respond to. You might be thinking in your mind, but many of our donors are probably also really anxious right now, and that is true. So if you do have those conversations, you want to acknowledge that and really contextualize why you're having this conversation with them and be understanding of where they are in the moment. And so if they say no, if they say they can't right now, that's a good answer. But there would be some of the things that I would try about for those of you that had to cancel a spring event. Any questions about
Jenny, can I ask a question about that quickly? So in thinking about that, you know, especially about like an online auction or something like that. So obviously a lot of the donations we generally get are from small businesses who right now, you know, are likely struggling. So what do you think about just like, obviously it can't be business as usual, but do you think, in your opinion, that businesses will still be willing to give those items right now, or what do you think?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, I guess
Okay.
the bummer is I also never fundraised in a pandemic before. So it's a little uncharted territory. I don't think it hurts to ask, but let me get into some of the other stuff that I was going to talk about, because I think it speaks to this a little bit, which is we first have to meet them where they are. And so the start of the conversation might be more about how they're doing and what they need, and then you can use your best judgment to see if it's appropriate to ask or not. It might be easier for them to make a gift in kind, you know, to an auction than it would have been to be a cash gift right now. So, so hold that thought. Are there any other comments or questions that you guys want to make about the status of your organizations and the people you're serving, and how are your board members doing in all of this? Are they helpful? Are they walking around like the sky is falling? What's your board doing? Nothing? Is the board doing nothing?
Danny?
It's
Yeah.
Fern. I just want to say, as a board member, I am concerned for the organization, and mostly because we're in the process of a move right now. And also, so we have this identity thing. People don't know where we're moving because we're closed too. And so when we reopen, that's going to be confusing. But I think your idea about getting in touch with the donors and getting in touch with our mailing list and letting them know everything that's going on is helpful.
Good. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So here's some fundraising strategies, ideas, tips, and techniques. So during times of crisis, and we saw this when during the recession and the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, donors started to redirect their funding to direct services. So social services like food, shelter, healthcare, those core things that were basically keeping people alive or safe. So for those of you that are not social service organizations, you want to keep that in mind because it's going to be really critical that you do more to talk about how your programs, your mission are contributing solutions to this whole problem. And it's doable, but it's just something that you need to sort of keep in mind. If you have, for example, because I know some of you are on here, say you are a farmland trust, you might want to talk about the work that you're doing to support the farmers right now. So shifting it from, hey, support farmland trust, to, hey, help us support the farmers that we work with. So you can shift your message that way. Joan, I know you're a history organization, so you have the opportunity to talk about or share, you know, the context of history, and what we had witnessed in the past, and how we were able to recover from it. So you can talk about the importance of history and the lessons that we can learn there. So really sort of leaning into the ways that your organization is helping the community. For those of you that are arts organizations, I think it is right and appropriate for you to emphasize how art is integral to our communities and our way of expressing what is going on in our communities, and showcasing the programs that help the community come together and understand what's going on in the world and express their feelings around that. So it's less about, hey, this is who we are as an organization and here is how you can support us, and more about donors. It's really important for us to keep these things moving forward, give through us to those people, to those needs. So it's a little bit of a messaging shift there. It's a little less focused on ourselves and a little bit more focused on the ultimate outcome that we're trying to get to.
Thank you. Good point.
Happy to help. So the other thing that I think is sort of goes along with that is the reality that you are organizations and you need operational funding and you have people who need salaries and you have work that you need to do. So it is okay to fundraise for operations, but again, I would put some nuance on it. Since most of our organizations, our people are our programs, you want to talk about, again, that outcome that we're driving to, and less focus on, hey, help us keep the lights on. We know we need the lights internally, but for the donor, they don't want to hear about our need for lighting. They want to hear about how we're doing things during this dark time that's going to make it better for all of us. If you were to, for example, and I'm just going to use the Farmland Trust again because it's very concrete. Say you set up a special emergency fund for farmers and you want to fundraise just for that emergency fund, help our farmers. That might not be something that you normally do, but this is an emergency. You can give yourself a percentage of those restricted gifts as long as an organization, you have a policy for doing that and you are clearly communicating that policy with the donors. So for example, if you start a emergency fund for farmers and you're asking donors to give to this fund, you want to put in that communication, you know, just so you know, a portion of your donation, 5%, 10%, whatever you decide, is going to go to maintaining the programs and services of the organization. So you want to call that out, but that's a way that you can both meeting the needs of the people that you're trying to serve and also continuing to generate some revenue for your organization as a whole. Okay, third point. Any question about those two things? I'm sorry, I got a little chat thing here. That be a policy? Yes, you would want the board to approve it. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Nope, you're welcome. Thanks, Gina. Okay, so beware of the emergency fundraising message. I know that we're all kind of in an emergency right now and it feels like the sky is falling, but everyone feels that way and everyone is in a panic. And so it's going to be hard for you to differentiate yourselves from everyone else that's saying the sky is falling and we're in a panic. The problem with emergency messaging is that you really can only do it once. So you don't want to put all of your eggs in that basket because this might be much longer than we anticipate. And if you are in a cycle of emergency fundraising for a long period of time, your donors are going to start to become numb to those requests. So you want to be really careful about how you're communicating at this time. It's okay to express urgency. It's okay to talk about how this has really shifted your priorities and that you have needs that you weren't anticipating. But I would as much as you possibly can, steer clear of the, if you don't donate today, we're going to have to close our doors. Because it's just going to start to not be heard by the donors because so many will be doing that. So try as much as you can to stay away from that emergency fundraising message. Or if you do feel like you absolutely have to do some emergency fundraising, know that you can really only send that message out once. So be really, really clear that that's the best time for you to use that type of an appeal. If you use the emergency fundraising message, you also have to partner that with some very specific and concrete things that you are going to do beyond their donations to help you pull yourselves out of the emergency. So it's not enough for them to bail you out. You have to explain how their cash is going to give you the footing that you need to make some changes so that you're not going to be in that position in the near future. So you really have to have a solid plan for recovery before you even go out and do the emergency appeal. Any questions about that? Have any of you tried to do the emergency appeal so far in the middle of all of this?
No.
No. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Keeping that in our back pocket,
Yeah.
for sure, as much as we can.
Yeah. Let's see. You know, in a situation, so Britton just asked if it would reflect negatively if we were to appear that close to the edge. In a situation like we're in right now, I don't think so. I don't think we can be held accountable for the impact of this virus. This is not something that any of us could have predicted. And because this is so unusual, it's not like we could prepare for this. The reality is also that many, many nonprofits have very lean margins and not a lot of buffer. So we often find ourselves to be more precarious than other institutions for that reason. So much of our resources are going to doing the work or helping the people that we're trying to help. We don't necessarily hold enough back for ourselves in order to have a big savings account for emergencies like this. So I think we could be okay in expressing that this is unusual times and it's really had a dramatic impact. It's just, again, if we do that emergency appeal, we want to make sure that we can say, and in the future, we're going to be even more prepared for a calamity so that we don't find ourselves in this again, which is something that we all want anyway, right? Like we're all finding ourselves in this really strange time. And now we're like, okay, great, next virus. I know that I'm going to stock up on toilet paper well in advance and I'm going to have a year's worth of savings instead of 6 months. And, you know, like I can already hear the things that I'm going to do differently in my head. So I don't think that that would be unusual for anyone else. Any other questions? Okay. On top of like try to avoid the emergency fundraising message, I would also encourage you to be thoughtful about whether or not it's appropriate to solicit at all. So it's different for those of you that are in the annual fund. So for example, you were counting on your event that you had to cancel. I think it's probably, in most cases, appropriate for you to continue to engage your donors. I'm going to talk in a little bit about how we might want to shift the way that engagement happens, but annual operating fundraising happens on a regular basis. And so there's a certain element that needs to happen regardless. I do think you can shift how you're asking, and you might want to postpone your appeal or change the messaging that you were planning for the appeal. So for example, those of you that are coming up on Give Local, you might have been thinking of having your examples of $50 will help us provide 3 meals to kids. And that might be a really important message to keep right now because people are worried about kiddos going hungry. Some of you, others of you might have been saying, you know, well, this will buy 4 school uniforms, and you might want to change that because school uniforms aren't probably the biggest priority right now. So if you were planning on doing an appeal letter, or even if you just decide, whatever you were going to say is in terms of messaging during your big event, you might want to change that message to something that's more pertinent to what's going on right now. And again, going back to what elements of your work can you either shift or create to focus more on direct service and less on the organization as a whole. Campaigns are another story. So, and if you're planning for a campaign, that's another story as well. I do have a couple different organizations that I'm working with or are in the middle of capital campaigns. And the research is showing that it's best to postpone some of the asking and fundraising during capital campaigns right now. Because campaign fundraising is often above and beyond what you're doing on an annual basis, and it's usually for a capital project, not more meals in homes or meals, emergency funding to help people stay in their homes, it's going to feel a little tone deaf if you're out there asking for really large gifts for something that's not acutely needed right at this moment. So you just want to be really careful about your campaign timing and be weigh very carefully what you need to absolutely do right now for whatever reason and what you could wait a month or 2 months for until the dust settles. I have a client that was going to start a feasibility study and they chose to postpone it to the fall because they felt like it would just not look good or be perceived as if they were being thoughtful of the rest of the community to go out and test a big campaign project. I have another campaign client that just decided that they were in the quiet phase of their campaign right now and they're going to hold off on doing solicitations for a month until we know more. So it's unfortunate and it's hard because a lot of times campaign money is really important money, but your donors are probably not in the headspace where they can think about making 5, 6, or 7-figure gifts at this point anyway.
Hey, Danny, can you hear me? It's Amanda Hickle.
I can. Hi.
Yay. Hi. Hey, we're going through a capital campaign right now too, and we're doing exactly what you proposed, which is pausing, not only for kind of the economic reasons. A lot of our gifts were gifts of stock, gifts of investments, but then also just for kind of the health reasons, because of a lot of our donors, and generally a lot of our donors are older, 60s and older, and so just for health reasons, not going to their house and meeting with them, so yeah, we totally paused on that. Now the typical fundraising part of things is a little bit different, but the capital campaign, it's just a pause at this point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And my heart hurts for every organization that is in the middle of a capital campaign or planning a capital campaign, because those are such powerful and exciting and big lifts for organizations that I really just want everything to go full steam ahead. But I think it's a sound decision to wait for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. I have emergency funding here, and I want to clarify that this is different from emergency fundraising for the organization. So this would be if you were creating an emergency fund for some of your client base or for a particular service that you might not normally be doing, but you see a need among your community that you want to help meet. So I think it's okay for you to do emergency funds to help support other people or other programs. If you're an arts organization, you might want to consider doing an emergency fund for artists. I was talking to a friend last night, and they're working with an organization right now that's doing that very thing. So that might be something that is useful to you. If you are Christy at CAP, I know that you have an emergency fund for folks. So, highlighting that and giving people an opportunity to give to that, I think is an appropriate way to fundraise during this time.
I have a quick question about that. What's the organization that's doing that? Just so I'm curious if I can look at how they're presenting that, if you can share.
I don't actually know. I can find out for you. It was my friend, it was actually a friend of mine from Seattle that I was talking to. We were doing an online happy hour last night, and so she was talking about that, so I can find out for you.
Okay, thank you. And then I have just a quick question too about the emergency funding scenario. So all of our schools are closed and we're really wanting to do and switch over to virtual art classes or engagement that all the kids and families and make it different and tailor it to the elderly as well. Something that's been haunting me with that idea in the last couple of days is I'm assuming that all of the kids and families have a computer or a laptop, you know, that they can even access virtually. And so it occurred that perhaps an emergency funding idea to help fill that gap might be one route we could go. Would it be appropriate if we did something like that, that we could still restrict some of that donation at a small percentage to help with the cost of even running that type of program right now? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, the reality is any initiative that you're going to offer is going to have operating costs associated with it, right? Like, whether it's purchasing technology and delivering the technology that you purchase, whatever that is, it's going to have some. So I think, again, like, it's right and appropriate to budget for those costs, you know, in those restricted gifts. You just want to make sure that your donors know that it's not 100% going to the cost of a laptop unless you've already found other ways to cover that cost.
Okay. Thanks.
I love that idea. I would donate to that.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, well, it's interesting. I have a friend that just texted me last night and he's like, hey, I've got an extra computer. Do you know any teachers? Do you guys need to use it? And then the ball just kept rolling from there.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Well, so see, and that's the other thing. It might be appropriate for you guys to partner up with different organizations right now. So the more collaboration and sharing of existing resources and the more joint communication you can do, one, it's going to feel really good to the donors because they're going to be like, oh, look, they're like problem solving and they're coordinating, and so they're being smart about how the current resources are being used. And I know if I make a donation here, it's going to be shared with multiple organizations, and that means everyone's going to get a lift up, and that's great. But two, it's going to genuinely strengthen each of you because you're going to be working together, and there's so much strength when you come together and share resources and information. So I think that's a great idea.
Cool.
Okay, let's keep moving. All right, so here are some of my ideas for you. So I think right now, if it's not appropriate for you to solicit, it's super important and appropriate for you to continue to inform and connect. So those are the two areas, even as it might feel really bad to straight up ask for money, that you can do with your donors and the rest of your stakeholders. Everyone's home. We have more time than we normally do. So people are looking for content. So you have a great opportunity to deliver content to your stakeholders. And it's not, again, just content about your organization itself, but content about your issue. So if you could put on a webinar on the value of art in society, if you're an organization dealing with small businesses, you could create an economic lesson for kiddos that are being homeschooled right now. If you are a conservation organization, you can talk about the value of healthy lands and waters and how that supports healthy people. So it's content like that is what I mean, not necessarily so much content about your organization and the programs that you offer. And do use technology. If you don't know how to create an iPhone video or do a FaceTime video, you have a teenager in your life that does, and they will help you do that. They will introduce you to Instagram stories in no time at all. So webinars, videos, photo gallery. So again, like I was doing this online happy hour, and one of the things that we did was like showed photos of our pets. I have a cat, so photo of my cat. So things that just humanize us and bring us together. So you can do all sorts of silly and fun things like that to keep people informed and engaged. Other ideas that I came up with, food as medicine as a topic, affordable recipes. So if you are an organization that is trying to support people living in poverty, during this time, how can they still have healthy meals, but in an affordable way? Kim, I remember you would know that so well from your time at Power Packs. So all these great things. A history lesson, the Lancaster New Era had an article yesterday on the 1918, 1919 influenza epidemic and how that played out in our community here. And I read the whole thing. I was fascinated by it. So I think there are lots of different pieces of content that you could provide to your donors and stakeholders during this time. The value of that is you're positioning yourself as an expert. You're also staying in front of them, so they're going to be continually engaged with you over these next few weeks or months in a fresh way. So those are my ideas for keeping people informed. Any questions about that? So in a little bit, I'm going to have you break into groups and come up with some of your own ideas. So just, get ready because it's coming.
Okay.
Okay. So then we want to talk, doubled that slide. So then we also want to talk about connecting with people. So how can we continue to have relationships with our stakeholders when we can't have the big events, when we can't do face-to-face meetings? Many of your donors, Amanda, like you said, are older. So they might be people that don't have family near them, or they might be living in an assisted living facility. So reaching out to them and genuinely asking them how they are, or if they need anything, or letting them know that you're thinking of them beyond that who they are as a donor, but as like a human being that might be vulnerable right now, is a really important way to connect with them. You can, and this ties into the content from the earlier slide, but more frequent emails and newsletters and touch points that just help people to keep feeling engaged with the world. And this is also a really great way that you can put your board members to work. So if they're reaching out to the donors and checking in on them and giving them updates on what's going on in the organization and asking how the donor is being impacted by all of this, that's a really important stewardship touch point that a board member can do. Again, using this wonderful technology that we have right now, creating things like we're doing together at this moment, for your donors, you can invite them to participate in a session where you talk about your mission and the different aspects of it and how it's shifting right now. Again, not necessarily to ask them for money in this moment, but to keep them informed. They care about the work that you're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be your donors. So giving them opportunities to connect with you in the organization, even while everything is topsy-turvy, helps to build community. How many of you are familiar with the Jeffersonian dinner model?
Never heard of it.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay, so I'll send you, I have a paper on that too. Someone said something.
I said,
Yeah, Gina, I remember we did it while I was with you guys, so that makes sense. So the Jeffersonian dinner model is usually there are 12 people in a room, and you gather together around a certain topic, and everyone is an expert on one facet of the topic. And there are 3 questions that get posed, and so the question gets posed, and then everyone in the room has to speak to that question or based on their own personal experience. So something like that could easily be managed on a Zoom session because you're all there and you can all speak when it's your turn. And you go through those 3 questions, and usually there's a bigger discussion that comes out of that, and usually some takeaways and action steps. So that could be a model that you could replicate online. You could do an online happy hour like I did with my friends yesterday. We all had a glass of wine. We were all talking about what was going on in our life. We were talking about our work. You could do something like that. I was the only one in Lancaster, so they were starting their happy hours much earlier than I was, for the record. Just in case you were worried about that. I talked about webinars a little bit ago, but again, if you had content that you were going to share at your event, you could shift that and do a version of that online. And again, I would recommend Zoom as a tool for all of this. I'm not as familiar with some of the other online conferencing options, but I've used Zoom a lot and it works really, really well. So we talked about handwritten notes and letters, and then insider info sessions. So if there's a special topic or something that you want to offer that feels a little exclusive or particularly interesting to a certain group of your stakeholders, you can offer those as well. And I just jotted some ideas here. So activities for children being homeschooled. A realtor could do a presentation on what the market is like during the coronavirus. You could, if you were a housing organization, talk about how to negotiate with a landlord to pay your rent differently during this time, if that's important. Or again, like a day in the life of a staff member working remotely. You could do a photo collage of all of your pajama bottoms, whatever it is that would be sort of fun and interesting for folks.
Danny, question for you,
Yeah.
and for anybody else that's in the room. Does anybody else have any other resources to share specifically related to, I guess we find ourselves in a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to technology and connecting remotely. And I was reading yesterday about this thing called Thank You, which allows you to email a video to your donors that you can either thank them for their gift or communicate with them. So I was curious to know if anybody had any other resources that they're using or programs that they're using that might be helpful for the group.
That's a good question.
It's a great question.
Has anyone used ThankView? I had never heard of it until yesterday, so I didn't know
No, I
if
haven't
anybody
heard
used
of
it.
that.
No, first time hearing of it too.
I would check. So some of these things might be duplicative. So for example, I have MailChimp, you know, because you got these emails from me, but MailChimp has an option to embed a video in an email. So if you're using MailChimp or Constant Contact, you wouldn't necessarily need ThankView. You know what I mean? Like you could probably do it from your existing mechanisms. You just need to figure out how to make those mechanisms work for you. So check with what you have first. Yeah?
Danny, it's Kim McDevitt. Could you share some guidelines on how often we should be posting? You know, I'm concerned about sending out too many email blasts to folks during this time. What's appropriate where we'll still continue to get high open rates?
I think it would depend on what it is, Kim, honestly, because if you were doing like gobs of like the sky is falling, will you give us money? You can't do a lot of those. But if you're doing sort of fun or cute content, you could do that probably a couple times a week and be fairly safe, because like say you send one thing and that's going to appeal to one element of your audience base, but the second thing that you send out would appeal to someone differently. So if it's informational or connecting kind of content, I think you can send that out multiple times a week right now. And that's not all that different from what you would be doing when the world was normal.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of content in mental health right now, right?
Right. Yeah. You reminded me though, I think I meant to say something and I don't know if I said it enough. So if you do need to do an appeal right now, I would recommend as much as possible that you try to do personalized or one-on-one conversations where you're asking donors for money rather than blanket appeals, for two reasons. One, there are a lot of organizations right now that are already sending like, please help us appeals, so you're going to get lost in the shuffle. And two, some of this is very nuanced, so you want to be able to have nuanced conversations with your donors and be careful in how you're asking and mindful of what is going on in the life of the donor, and you can't do that if you're just lobbing an email out there. So if you do need to make appeals, like for example, if you wanted to ask people to donate instead of what they would have been giving through the auction, or if you want to come up with an emergency fund, or if you do have an acute need for your own organization, I would recommend that you start and as much as possible do face-to-face, or not face-to-face obviously, but like personalized conversations, whether it's a Zoom face-to-face or a phone call, rather than just a blanket email. Sorry, I should have said that earlier. Other questions or comments about technology offerings?
We haven't really talked about social, and thinking about staying in front of your donors and being seen as a leader. So, offering, I'm on the MHA board, and, mental health tips for working at home, or doing those things that are more sort of helpful content, but then the ask is personalized. It kind of sounds like that's what you're suggesting.
That is what I'm suggesting. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yep, totally. Thanks for clarifying. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there are any other tools that I think would be particularly helpful right now. I mean, I do think Instagram stories are a good one. The Facebook Live video thing is working pretty well for people right now. One of the yoga studios near my home is doing like online yoga sessions during the Facebook Live video. So that kind of stuff is working really well for folks. I don't.
have a quick question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm curious. So we're looking at things where we're balancing out of offering virtual options for free, and then also trying to think about what we could do and charge a minimal fee, just to at least have some sort of income activity with the programming / event type things that we do. I am curious if anyone has any feedback or suggestions about like what's an appropriate cost per se. Like, so let's say we do some sort of happy hour or Jeffersonian dinner. I don't know like what the appropriate charge or what, I don't know what would be good to charge for that, I guess. If that makes
I don't
sense.
know that the happy hour or the Jeffersonian dinner would be a thing that I would recommend you charge for, because again, it's those connecting opportunities with your donors, and you kind of, what you're trying to do with these connecting activities is really stay in relationship with them and show them that you're thinking about their needs for contact and relationships and community while all of this is going on. So if you put a price tag to that, it's going to shift the whole vibe. Now, if you wanted to do like an online painting session, like
I'm thinking more along that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to donors, this idea. It's just new to us to have to shift to online programming.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah, so I think if you were like to offer an online painting class, like an online paint and sip or something, that you could probably charge an amount for. But I don't know. I mean, I know Port Angeles, but I'm not sure what would be the right price point. But this is another thing that you can bring your donors into and ask their advice on, and then make decisions. So they're going to feel heard as part of that process, and they'll probably tell you, well, like I can give you $5 right now, or whatever it is.
I have a question related to that question, Danny, which was we're offering a lot of online programming right now. We do professional development for teachers, so we're doing a lot to help teachers transition to online learning environments. And one of the things that we were hoping to offer free, we can afford to do it for free, kind of, but it'd be nice to cover some of those costs. So I was wondering about asking a voluntary, if have a button that says if you're able to help, it would be really helpful, or something like that, and offering them free, but sort of that kind of an opt-in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because again, you're not asking in the way of like, please give us money. You're like, hey, this is what if you want to support us right now, we would appreciate it. That sounds fine. There are a lot of restaurants doing that right now too. All right, so hang on, there's a question, and then I want us to break into groups briefly. Is this the season for applications to charitable? How do we keep them? Sorry, hold on. How do we have to move my things? Fern, your question about keeping in front of the staff for applications to charitable foundations. I'm not really sure, because I think part of it is just people are sort of floundering and they're getting used to this new reality. And if they're not as engaged, you know, it might be because they're also having to manage childcare and homeschooling while they're trying to do their jobs. And I would just be persistent in your outreach to them, but not get too hung up on it. You know, if you can't reach them, then you can always say, you know, we weren't able to reach you. But beyond that, I think it's more a matter of being patient and mindful of the fact that there's a lot going on in everyone's lives. Okay, so I had one person that just said they had to go because they have another meeting, and this is, we have 5 minutes left, but I do want you guys to try to brainstorm some things. So I'm gonna break you up into these groups, and can I have like another 15 minutes of your time, and those of you that need to hop off can hop off? Does that sound fair? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, bye, Wanda. All right.
See you, Danny. It's Christy, but I gotta leave.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Okay, where did my rooms go? Sorry guys, I gotta find my, oh, there we go.
It's kind of funny.
Okay, so you are going to get sorted into a room right now. And I think you just did. And as you guys
Yeah, well,
hop to, you're gonna get turn green. Okay. Think you have to join the room. Okay. So Kim, you just need to join the room and then you'll be good to go. Okay. So here are my questions for you. Okay. Okay. In your discussion groups, I want you to share 1 or 2 things that you've done so far while you've been on this coronavirus experience, and brainstorm 1 or 2 things for yourselves that you'll go back and implement after this conversation, and take like 3 or 4 minutes.
oh, hi there. There she is.
Can you hear me? Okay, could you hear my instructions?
We didn't. We were just talking about
You're like, what's happening? Okay, so, whoops. So, your instructions are to share 1 or 2 things that you've done so far, and then brainstorm 1 or 2 things that you can do with the group that you're gonna take back and try to implement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. I gotta go join the other room. So,
Okay.
Okay.
Who wants to go first?
Really cool things.
okay.
Thank you. That's I'm going to put all of that on our communications manager, Molly. She does beautiful work and
Oh, absolutely.
face out there for us. But yes, she's working to gather resources from our farming community about what they need and how we can put their message forward. And there's, you know, it's complicated. In Seattle, all the restaurants have just shut down. So people flying to restaurants are in a pickle, but now grocery is having an abundance of demand. So there is demand, but having to readjust the supply chains. And so we're just trying to help connect where we can.
Hi guys, I just joined you because I want to make sure that you're clear on what you're doing in your breakout group. So you have 2 questions to answer. What have you done so far during this experience? And what are some 1 or 2 takeaways from our time together today that you might want to try to implement moving forward? So if you guys can sort of brainstorm some ideas together, and you'll have a few minutes, and then I'll close the groups and bring us all back together, okay?
Cool. Good. I just thought I'd show everyone what's going on here since I often am muting myself and disappearing.
That's so cute. Yeah, that's adorable. They're helping. They're helping.
Yes, lots of help today, Lord, for a while.
We disappeared.
Okay. All right.
Gina, I would love to connect with you offline if that's cool.
Yes, of course.
Awesome.
I'd probably loop in Molly, our communications senior manager, as well, because she's the master behind how and where we're communicating with our people.
Awesome.
Okay, I can share something. I'm Ann Davis, and I'm from York, Pennsylvania, and I have a small theater group. We have 2 productions that have currently been what we're saying as postponed, but the calendar will determine whether that's a reality or not. In the meantime, today we did filming.
And I think as an approach we've talked about as a team, sharing that. Even though it's not our program, we're sharing how somebody else is sharing. If you
Right. That's a great idea.
One thing that we did, I work for art museums, is we had our staff go through and shared a Google Doc, so you could do it from home or wherever, a list of like our favorite art films that are available via streaming, art-related podcasts, and books. And then, of course, with like the books, we encourage them to support their local businesses as much as possible. But if you are going to order off of Amazon, please use Amazon Smile and list us as and so we kind of rolled that out, sharing it with like our volunteers and members first, and then it's something that we're just going to put on our website, and we have like a PDF of it. You can just click the link and it will take you right there.
Cool.
Yeah, and most of our collection is not normally available online, and we have special exhibits right now that are actually of student artwork. So it's kind of terrible that like the schools are out of session and they can't, no one's seen this wonderful stuff. So we did like a virtual tour that we just filmed, and then we created like a slideshow with each piece, and it's almost 300 works, so it was kind of a lot to put together. Spur of the moment, but we got it done this afternoon, actually earlier, and then putting that out there for people to just so that they can see it. And we'll probably have to extend those exhibitions because the things that we have coming in May, the lending institutions are now talking about having to push back things on their end because there's some conservation and framing work that is getting delayed because they're not in the office. So it's sort of throwing everything off for us. And in terms of fundraising, like our annual meeting and big fundraising event in June, we've set for June 4th. Now we're thinking maybe we could try to push it back, but we have a June 30th end of fiscal year. So we really want to try to have it before then so that we can have this revenue come in. But that event was sort of themed on the exhibition that now made
I work with a nonprofit that is doing workforce development right now, and so it's kind of hard given the nature of some of these businesses and who's trying to cut back. But one of the things I thought was really good because it really is affecting our families, our clients, is the affordable recipes idea and putting that online because I think that's something, they can get food from the food bank, but they don't always know what to do with it. So like dried beans and things like that to come up with some creative recipes would be really good. And then the other thing that sounded really good would be to do like an insider session with maybe one of our employers talking about what their needs will be once things get kind of back to normal and some of the ways that they would like to get people trained for some of their jobs.
Hey guys, I'm interrupting because you have about 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes, and then I'm gonna close the groups and then we'll all come back together, okay?
Sounds good.
Danny.
Stuff's coming up this summer, so we're kind of trying to figure out how that's going to go. We don't know yet, but you guys gave me an idea because I was thinking about ways to just engage fun type things, because we've been trying to do online trainings and things like that, but we have a water bottle that's got our logo on it that people have traveled with, and they have all, taken pictures, and we've done a whole lot of engagement around that. And I think maybe we could do an at-home water bottle thing so that people could show us their bottles or whatever. And I didn't think about that until I was listening to you guys talking about ideas, so I appreciate the conversation a lot.
Good.
That would be fun. Like, people would show their water bottles doing because it's kind of a thing in our organization, the water bottle and its adventures. So
yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
So you have about 2 more minutes before your session is gonna rejoin the whole group. So
Okay.
up what you were saying, and then I'm gonna bring you all back. Hi, Avery.
All right. Hello.
One other thing that we did is
Yeah. Here we are.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
How was that for you?
Really cool.
Really good.
Yeah, you liked it?
Yes.
Isn't Zoom fun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uplifting.
Yeah. So in case you want to use this on your own, it couldn't be simpler. There is if you get so I have the Zoom Pro, and there's an option called breakout rooms, and you make sure that that's enabled. And then when you're ready, you can just click on it, and it tells you how many people are online with you. And then you can say, based on the number of people, I want like X number of breakout rooms, and it'll automatically assign folks. You do have an option to do it manually, but I just did it the automatic way to save time. So it's really, really easy. I'm super not tech savvy, and I could figure it out. So that means you guys can figure it out. Okay. Anyone want to share an idea that they're super excited about before we go into the last portion of our time together? Okay. Well, some things to keep in mind. Anything that you're trying right now does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be polished. I think given how rapidly things are changing, it's more important that things be pushed out in a timely manner than they are perfect and grammatically correct and have all the bells and whistles. So don't worry if you are using some of this technology for the first time and it's not perfect the first time. You'll get better at it, and I think people will probably enjoy the authentic sort of rugged approach to some things right now. It's a scary time, so focus on what you can control. You can't necessarily control how the donors are going to respond, but you can control how you're communicating and connecting with them. You can control how you're making decisions internally in the organization. You can control how you're taking care of yourselves and others. So I would encourage you to focus on that because you do have agency in the midst of all of this madness, and it's important to not lose sight of that. Whatever happens at the outcome of this, your organization still has a mission. Your organization's mission isn't going to change. You exist in the world to do something beautiful and amazing. You're still going to need to do that beautiful, amazing things. How you do it might look different going forward. So you might need to pivot some of your programs or some of your activities, either short-term or long-term, but you're still going to be driving toward that mission. So that can be sort of your shining star as you move forward. We already talked about this. If you need to solicit, try individualized and personalized solicitations rather than broad appeals. I think you'll have a better response. You'll definitely have a deeper and richer conversation than if you were just sending out a newsletter. Your donors are scared too, but they still want to help. They were supporting you before this started because they care about what you're doing, and they're going to keep caring about what you're doing. What they might need from you is to be told ways that they can help differently than they had been in the past, whether that's the timing of their gifts, whether that's giving beyond money, whatever that looks like. They still want to connect and they still want to help you, even though they're scared. It might not be appropriate to solicit now, but the more you can stay connected during this time, your donors are going to be much more ready and receptive to future solicitations. So I know it's hard sometimes for organizations to do really deep cultivation work or really active stewardship in the best of times. So this might be an opportunity for you to do that in ways that you don't normally do it because it's not appropriate for you to be doing some of your usual activities. And last but not least, this will end. I'm not sure when it's going to end, but it is going to end. And we are going to manage this, and we have friends. And one of the things that I love about my work is that I get to meet awesome people like you that are resourceful and resilient. And now you have found each other, so we can all get through it. All right, my last question about what comes next is, how can I keep helping you?
I mean, bringing us together like this was really great. I do appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Danny.
Yeah.
I wish we could clone you.
Yes, I second that.
That would get super weird.
Thank you, Danny. This is so
Thank
helpful.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope.
Some of you might feel like you are in a situation where you need a little bit more focused support. And I do one-on-one coaching sessions. And I have decided that for at least the next month, I'm going to cut my rates in half to try to offer something that's helpful to you that is affordable. So I can send out a link about that. I'm not trying to like sell you on my business at this point, but I just want to let you know that I'm trying to do things that are affordable and supportive during this time. So if you do feel really stressed,
Thank you. That's good to know.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And I think actually to answer that question again on the how can I help, I think that technology, like any type of information, comes across your way of virtual options. This is just so new to us.
Yeah, for sure. I can look that up. I'll do what I can to collect some cool things. There are people that are more technologically advanced than I am, but if you haven't figured out how to do like live Facebook feeds or or use a technology like Zoom, I would start there, honestly.
Got it. Okay.
If you aren't a regular like email newsletter kind of organization, I would do that thing as sort of the beginnings, and then I'll see if I can find some other pretty cool jazzy stuff for you.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time today, and thank you for your contributions, and stay healthy and hug your pets and your family and no one other than that though, because we're not supposed to be doing that. So. Yeah. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.
Well, that was really cool.
It's really cool.